Much like the negotiation, I think, on structure, the components of the LOI were also very flexible. There were certain components of it, and mainly there was cash down, there was a note, and there was an earnout, for lack of a better term. Um, how much we wanted to push on those levers was really very much up to us, and it was met with very little resistance within certain parameters, of course. But we felt that if we were going to be here for the long term, we wanted to push more of it towards longer term upside, and we didn't receive any resistance to that. The communication between the Eli M&A team and myself and the other members on my team was very fluid, both early on reaching up to the LOI stage and then through due diligence. We found the due diligence process to be very intensive. We're a fairly small business, so the amount of exploration of what we had done over the past 8 years was very in-depth. We learned a lot from that process, and it was well worth going through. For me, the most interesting part of the due diligence process was the way our financials were scrutinized. And that really helped me to look at better ways to measure certain metrics over the long term. And that was really useful for us.
Having the Eli people come in and give us the story, which I think is very important, of how when they acquire a company, the process that they go through in acquiring a company, and the integration of the company and how we'll move forward as a company was very thorough, number one, and it made us feel good because they understood our business. And a lot of people, if you look at just a regular PE firm, they don't really understand. They love the numbers. They said, oh, great revenue, great EBITDA, we like healthcare, we like recurring revenue. You know, it checked off on all the boxes that they're looking for, but did they really understand what Practice Insight does? Well, I knew Eli did because they thought about creating their own clearinghouse. And so they understood the business. So it was great having people that came in and they understood exactly what they were doing. They had very, incredibly bright people on the technology side that got our technology, where a lot of the companies that we were talking to did not have a good grasp of what Practice Insight was doing on the technology side, as well as what we offered in terms of value-add service on, to our providers that we serviced. So that was again, that was just another plus on the Eli side, that a PE firm could not come close to replicating during this particular process.
And it depends upon what process there is, right? Sometimes it's a negotiated transaction just with one counterparty, which is the best, way for us to proceed. And that would be where, we're talking directly to the seller of a company or the, shareholders of a company. In that context, there's, you have your informal discussions initially, and then what you try to do is crystallize that into a letter of intent before you then reach the next stage, which is more detailed due diligence, and then expanding that letter of intent into definitive transaction documents like a stock purchase agreement or something along those lines. So the letter of intent can be, and they can differ depending upon the deal. Every deal is very, very different. But generally, they're all going to be similar in that they tell the Eli Global and the Global Bankers story, right? How are we different? The true long-term approach that we're able to take that we've talked about. The fact that there's evidence of the true long-term approach, meaning Eli Global has never sold a company that it's purchased in the past or that's part of the family. And so once an investment or an acquisition is made, that company is in the family for the long term. And so we retell that story in our bid letters or our letters of intent. And then we set forth the key transaction terms as well, so that there's at least an understanding in terms of what the key terms are. Those key terms are mainly price, structure, what are our intentions with respect to the management team going forward, what are some of our post closing strategies, how we would handle the company and its strategies, its people, its business going forward. And then we also will specify what our due diligence needs are in a letter of intent or in a bid letter. Sometimes we call it a bid letter. And often we'll seek exclusivity. And so that's the ideal. The ideal is when you get exclusivity. The ideal is when you're in a one-off negotiation with a party and you also get exclusivity. because then that gives you the certainty that over that exclusivity period, you have a high probability of successfully achieving the transaction. But that said, there are different, processes too. It ranges from a one-off negotiation to a full auction process where there's a financial advisor involved on the sell side, and they're talking to 10, 20 parties, different potential acquirers. And in that context, we often do seek to achieve exclusivity. Sometimes it's not possible at the first, what they call preliminary bid letter. Maybe you get it at the second stage, which is the final bid letter. But that is, there's a lot of, although there's different iterations of letters of intent bid letters, they're similar in their general content. It's just a function of, are they exclusive or not, really? And exclusivity is, of course, best, we think, for both parties, because it increases the probability of success. Yeah, I mean, we actually do take a unique approach to due diligence, and also just to processes generally. That's very different from most buyers in the marketplace. And that's actually why we're able to be so successful at transactions. So over a very short period of time, I think it's probably 3 years, we've done 18 transactions in the insurance space. And that would be a combination of acquisitions and also reinsurance transactions. And one of the reasons we're able to do that is because we take a unique approach to the process. Again, it's really more designed to how do we reach agreement and what's the quickest, most efficient way to get there, right? That's one. Two is we look at diligence as a way to, of course, understand what the risks are, but not as a way to reduce a price that we put on the table in the beginning. And in the market, generally the way it works is you have buyers who will bid very high, go into a process to the next stage of a process, eventually maybe even get exclusivity. And then once a typical buyer has exclusivity, they now have increased their leverage. They now use diligence for the most part to find reasons to reduce their price, because that initial price was designed to get them and it gained them an advantage. What we do is something different. When we put a price on the table or put a price forward, we generally strive to stand behind the price. And so while diligence is there to uncover risks and make sure that we're managing through those risks, via knowing what they are, but also maybe contracting around them in the deal documents, we generally try to use diligence to support the offer that we put forward. And we find that's a very different approach. We even say that in our bid letters, that we're going to take a different approach to due diligence than most sellers may have experienced in the past with other buyers or other processes that they may have been involved in.